that I was going to get a chance to go back with Jim, but we got another one scheduled. And so finally had the opportunity, and I was excited to go. The majority of the work, the primary work that we do at the school in Assam is teaching. We teach for 4 hours a day in the morning on a particular subject that we're given. So my subject was hermeneutics. And so I taught 4 hours for a month on hermeneutics. And if you've ever been scared that you didn't have enough information to fill a Bible class period, teaching for 4 hours will really give you that fear. It takes, before I went, I had studied and I thought I had enough information to cover all of the time and the material that I needed, and I got there and I realized I had about half of what I needed to get through the 2 weeks. And so luckily in the afternoons, a lot of times we have the afternoon free, and so you have some time to study for the next day, and so we were able to make some of it up. I did want to say, just talk about some misconceptions that I had before I went to India that I got from hearing several mission reports. One of those is that our work is a little bit different than some of the works you hear about that have all these mass baptisms. 100 people are baptized or 50 people are baptized, or you go out on evangelistic campaigns all the time. Our work's not that exactly. We are more teaching in the school there in Assam for the students, very similar to the preaching schools that we have here. We do go out and evangelize on the weekends, and we go out in the evenings and evangelize, but a little bit different than some of the mission reports that you've heard. We give money to Jim Waldron every year for goats, and those widows are not actually in Assam. They're in other parts of the country. But we didn't get to see those goats, those hundreds or however many goats we bought. We didn't get to see all of them, and not all the widows that they were given to, because we were teaching in the school. But we had a very good work, a very excellent time. A couple of these pictures here are just some pictures of the general area around us. I never really understood, this is probably not a great way to start off a presentation, but I never really understood how David was walking on his roof and he saw a woman bathing beneath him. Didn't really understand that concept until I went to India. And that accidentally happened. And it was not a pretty sight. This was no Bathsheba. But the showers oftentimes are open. There's nothing between your eyes and what's going on. And you can see some of that here. Here's some of the houses, and you can look down, and I might have a picture of it. Down here at the bottom of the screen, there is a home there, and some of those same facilities are right out there just in the open. And I was up on top of, I was 5 stories up. And so you see why that can happen. This is the garden. Mark wanted to see his garden. This was the very beginning, first couple days that we were there. The corn was starting to shoot a little bit. These are squash, I want to say. I can't remember what those are. Okra. There's some chilies back here, tomatoes back here. There's some pineapple over in this area, but I was told, unfortunately, it was going to take 3 or 4 years for that pineapple to actually come to fruition. This is a cow eating out of the garbage. There's cows everywhere, and like raccoons or mangy dogs, they'll go walk up to a trash can, pull out a trash bag, and rip it open, and they'll start eating old chip bags or whatever they can find in there. So this is the school. We're supposed to close the gate so the cow doesn't get in, but we failed that day. This is Dad's class. So he taught these individuals for the first 2 weeks, and then Brother Scott picked the class up the second 2 weeks. Some of these boys are what they call, they're part of the selection class. So we got there right at the change of the school year. So new students are coming in, and they take like a 2-week course, and then they take a test. on some of their English skills and their Bible skills, and they choose whether or not they think they'd be good candidates to come to the school. And so some of these boys were selected. A couple of them spoke almost no English at all, though, and so they decided to send them home, which I think was probably a good decision because every class is taught in English, the worship services are in English, and they would probably spend a year of their time doing nothing but learning English and not grasping anything from the classes if they were selected. And so they still have the opportunity again to come back if they want to, when they know a little bit more English. This is Brother DePac, and I think Mark studied with him when he was there. He was baptized this trip, and we studied with him in his home for about 2 hours maybe. His home is made of, this is bamboo. It's amazing what they can do with bamboo. And then there is flax that make up these walls, and then there is mud pasted over those flax. And so all that is, it's parts of a tree and mud, and that dries, and it creates their home. And I think Mark mentioned this, but during the rainy season, you'll have to redo that because it gets so wet that it comes off the walls, and it has to be redone. So he was baptized while we were there, and we were in his home here, and I have never had as many bugs crawling on me as I did in that study. It was probably 8, 9 o'clock at night, and there was one light bulb, and that one light bulb was right next to me. And there were bugs of all kinds on me while we were studying with him. He fed us a meal, and it was good. They were very poor, and I was amazed at their hospitality. Right here is, I think that's chicken curry, yellow curry. On my plate, that's fried eggplant. That was the slimiest. I had a hard time getting that down, but I ate it. And then they gave us these huge plates full of rice. There was also some different kinds of chicken. And their chicken isn't really the same. You don't go to the store and buy a nice piece of chicken that's had most of the bones removed and most of the gristle. Is that what it's called? Gristle? All that removed, all that's still in there. And so you bite into it, and you don't really know what you're biting into. I ate some parts of a chicken that I know I've never eaten before. But in this water came out of a well in the back of this house, and we're not supposed to drink unfiltered water. And so this food is all spicy. Everything you get in India is spicy, and we hadn't brought any water with us. And so we're like the rich man in the story of the rich man and Lazarus. You know, we're just staring at this glass of water, but we can't drink it as we eat all of this food. So it was almost an hour before we got home and we could drink anything. This is Galhate in the city. There are people everywhere. That looks like Jimmy Hatfield. I just noticed that. That's Brother Scott. This is the kitchen where we stayed. We have a gas range right there, microwave, toaster. There's our filtered water, refrigerator. We didn't live too badly in the school itself. It was pretty nice accommodations. These are the boys out working in the garden on a Saturday morning. This is the school. They painted the school, and now it's a pink color. And it wasn't supposed to be, I guess, when they painted it, but the chickens are right here. It's empty because they had killed all the chickens earlier. Still found some time for some volleyball. And the boys there are excellent volleyball players. These are some of the boys. They're from a part of the country called Manipur. And they speak very, very good English, for the most part. So this boy, his name's Tom. He was in my class. This boy's name is Lol Boy, Swan Lau, and I think his name's John. And these three were in Dad's class. Tom was in my class. This is Brother Ramesh and his wife and his two kids. Ramesh is the director of the school. and his wife teaches for the women's school. And there are two boys, Joseph and Benjamin. And this photo made me look a little tall. This is Brother Scott. And here's Ramesh back here. He's on 2 steps standing behind us. This is before worship on Sunday morning. So all these boys are students. Yeah, all of these boys are students at the school. This is the mountain, or it's really just a big hill, right next to the city. The city's name is Mirza. The bigger city where the airport is Galahate. This isn't a very good picture, but I took it anyway. I needed a picture of this bull. He's got this big hump on his back, and that's the only one I have. I was walking to the girls' school to preach one night, and this bull walks beside me, just on the street, and I could tell he was a little bit flustered. He was making a bunch of noise. He wasn't very happy, and I could tell that he wasn't. And then I was walking faster than he was, and so he got behind me. And he's still making noise when he's behind me. And I thought, if I'm going to die as a missionary, I don't want it to be, from this cow on the side of the road. I look behind me, and I look back, and all of a sudden he starts making a bunch of noise. You can tell he's running somewhere. And I whip my head around thinking it's going to be me. He's running out into the road. He runs directly into a motorcycle that was passing on the road and wrecks this bike. And so this was right outside the girls' school. And people didn't really act like it was that big of a deal. I said to some of the boys, I asked them if that was usual or normal or it happened a lot, and they said it does happen a lot because the cows just walk in the street. This is my class. We've got 7. We originally had 8. There's one boy who I have this picture of a little bit later. His sister died while we were there. His sister was 11, and she died of malaria. And usually that's treatable, but I guess a big problem in India is that doctors don't really care to spend a whole lot of time with you. They'll diagnose you with something and just ship you out the door. And what happened to her was she was wrongly diagnosed. They didn't know that she had malaria, and it just worked in her system. And by the time they took her back to the hospital and realized it was too late, she had gone into a coma, and she died a little bit later. And so that boy missed the last week of my class because of that. But I had very good students. My class probably wasn't the best because it was the first time that I had done something like that and taught for that long. But my students were very good, and they were very patient with me. And hermeneutics, if you've ever studied hermeneutics, it's not the most exciting subject to study for 4 hours a day, but they did an excellent job. This is actually in New Delhi. We might come back to that. This is a picture when Dad was leaving. This is Surya. He is the driver at the school. He's my age. And he's been a driver at the school for 3 years. And he will be going back to the south in Tamil Nadu in 2 months to go back home. He wants to get married, and being at the school, there's some difficulties with him getting married, and so he's going to go back home and get a job. But he's probably who I spent the most time with when I was there, and we went around the city several times, and we had some fun. This was me preaching, I think on a Sunday morning. I spoke every Sunday. The last Sunday that I was there, they told me that I was speaking in the evening. They said someone else was going to be speaking in the morning. And I got to the morning service, and my name had been written up on the board as the speaker. So I found out about 20 minutes before I was supposed to speak that I was preaching that morning. And so we made it through, but it was a surprise. This is Surya again, and Bungobi. He was one of my students as well. This is Surya. This is the girl he wants to marry. Her name's Joshilla, and I know Megan spent a lot of time with her. She's very nice, very sweet girl. This was at a wedding. I'll tell you more about the wedding a little bit later. This is where the chicken went. This was alive about 20 minutes before I took this picture. That's a chicken foot. Megan said she ate a chicken foot, and I had to have one as well. All they do is fry that thing, and then you eat the outside, and it's pretty disgusting. This is Brother Deepak's house, a little bit better picture. All the furniture that they have is these small plastic chairs, and he sells clothing. He buys it at like a wholesaler, and then he sells it in the village. And so he's got backpacks and some other things over here that he was hanging up, and he was going to sell them. And he was going to go to Calcutta the next day, which was something like a 24-hour train ride. This is his baptism that same night. This is Brother Lalit, and he baptized him. Later on, Brother Deepak's wife was baptized as well. And this is his wife right here. And these are his 3 daughters. Dad asked them, it was probably about 10 o'clock. We were ready to get home. And Dad asked them, he says, "Can I take your picture?" And we regretted it afterwards because they decided, for them to take a picture, they wanted to all get on their best clothes. They wanted to do their hair. It took them 30 minutes to get ready to take this final picture, and we just sat outside with the bugs. Those are the chickens. The first week of my class, I only had 2 students. I guess for Indians, getting back on the right time isn't that big of a deal. And so when school starts, some of your students are there and some of them aren't. And so for the first week of my class, I just had these 2 guys. This is Lamkan and Timothy. And he actually scored the best in my class overall. Working on some hermeneutics. This truck was driving down the road. I just needed a picture of it. He's got cardboard or something stacked all the way up there. Dad blew up a sausage in the microwave. Cows on the side of the road. This is Brother Ren Singh. He was the one whose sister died of malaria. But this was taken maybe a week or 2 before. This is a lizard that they killed. They saw it crawling down the building. They went outside and they just beat the thing to death with a 2x4 or something. And the reason that they killed it was because they wanted to eat it. And so that night we ate this lizard. And there it is. Yeah. It was better than the chicken foot, but it was extremely spicy. Extremely spicy. And that also still had the bones in it. So there's Dad. I don't think I put the picture of me in it. Here's a Bible study that we had with a denominational church. This church was, I believe they called themselves the Church of Jesus Christ, our Savior in God, or something like that. It was a denomination that I had never heard of, and I assumed that they were something like Pentecostals. Because we talked to them this Bible study was probably 6 hours long, and this was a whole congregation, and I think there's another picture. We probably had 25, 30 people, and more people started coming as we kept going with the study. And so we started about 2 o'clock, maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were preaching to them, teaching them, and they said, "Yeah, we agree. We agree with everything that you say. We don't have any problems with any of this." And so we're thinking, maybe they believe the exact same thing we do. Towards the end of the discussion, we got on some talks about spiritual gifts. Do spiritual gifts still exist? They believed that they did. They believed there were still healings and speaking in tongues and some of these other things. And so we spoke about that for probably an hour, 2 hours. And some of the people who had come in from the village asked questions, and we answered their questions as well. So I believe this was their preacher. But they didn't speak English. They spoke Assamese. And Brother Lalit right here, he translated into Hindi. And Brother Mongol, who was here, he translated into Assamese. There's some of the other people who came to listen. There's just a bigger picture. I think that was the longest Bible study I had ever had. We were 5, 6, 7 hours. It was well past dark by the time we quit. This is not a picture that I took in India. But they have bats this size in India. My dad tried forever. He tried 4 or 5 nights to go out on the roof and get a picture of these bats. They have fruit bats that fly above the school at night, and they're huge. They're bigger than any bat I've ever seen, easily. They're like the bats at the zoo. Their wingspan is probably this big, and Dad hates bats. So he was convinced that they were going to come down and eat him while he was standing out there. But this is about the size and about what they look like. No. But I was told they would if they could catch one. This is the Brahmaputra River, and it's a beautiful river. This was pretty close to the school, and I walked there one day, but all the sewage goes into this river, and so you don't want to go swimming. Before we talk about that, let me talk to you about some of the Bible studies that we had while we were there. I'm not the best photographer, and so I didn't take a picture of all of them. But the first study that we had was on a Saturday afternoon. We studied with a Muslim family. Very open. It was a younger couple and an older couple, and we studied with them for maybe 2 hours and talked with them for a long time. We invited them to service. They were very open. One of the younger girls was extremely interested, and we gave her some information, and hopefully that study can be continued. Next, we studied with a Hindu couple, and it's a little easier for me to study with a Muslim family than it is a Hindu family, because I know, at least this first trip, knew almost nothing about the Hindu religion, who their gods are, what they believe, anything like that. And so it was difficult. Lalit helped me quite a bit. We also studied with a father and a son. Brother Lalit, who I showed you his picture, as Mark told you, he's probably the most zealous evangelist that I've ever, without a doubt, that I've ever seen. He has a reputation in the school that if you go anywhere with Brother Lalit, you're going to be late. Because if you have to pull over and pump gas, he's going to preach to the guy who's pumping your gas. If you go to the store, you're not walking out of that store unless he talks to somebody about the gospel. No matter where you go, if you go to the shop downtown, you're going to be talking to somebody. And so I had the privilege, and it was a privilege, of working with him for quite a few days. And we went door knocking several times and found several people to study with. And I was really encouraged by him, and I learned a lot from him. And he'll teach you how to be a courageous evangelist. A lot of times he'll tell you, he'll walk up to somebody. There was a man sitting, we were getting tea at one of the shops in town. There was a man sitting there by the tea store, had no idea who he was. Brother Lalit asked him if he spoke Hindi. He said, yeah, I spoke Hindi. And he says, come here, Luke, preach to this man. And and you're standing there like, well, what do you want me to say? He's amazing at how zealous he is to teach. And I was amazed by him, and I hope to be able to work with him some more. One Saturday afternoon, him and I both went, and we spoke with a man and his son who were Hindus about the gospel. We had that study with the denominational church. We also had a study with, my book's right there, a Seventh-day Adventist pastor is what they called him. This was one of the relatives of one of the boys at the school, and he invited us to come. And we had a study for probably 3 or 4 hours. And you know when a study begins in the 7th and 8th chapter of Romans and the book of Revelation, you know that you're in for a long study. But that's where he started, in Daniel chapter 2. And we studied for a long time about dispensations, about the meaning of the prophecies in Daniel and some in Revelation. He seemed very honest. I don't know how much progress we made, but they're going to go back and study with him again. He gave me a book to read. He was under the impression, that he was obedient to the truth and that I wasn't, and he was very kind, trying to teach me what he thought I needed to know. And he gave me a book that was written by Ellen G. White, who was the founder of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's called The History of Redemption. And there's a chapter in there he asked me to read, and I told him that I would, and he gave me his email address so we could discuss it further. So when I'm done with that chapter, I'm going to email him, and hopefully we can continue that study. We also studied with a girl. She was 15. She was a Muslim girl. And I studied with a man, one of these men who was sitting on the shops that Brother Lalit introduced me to, was a man, he had one eye, and he didn't wear an eye patch. And so it was kind of distracting when we were when we were teaching him. These are goat intestines. And they eat these too. That's them. And I tried those, and of all the things I had in India, I think those were my least favorite. On the way back home, we had an opportunity to stop by a Hindu temple. This one is in town, and these are all carvings in here. And there's priests that sit inside here, and they chant all day. We had a chance to stop by the zoo. All I wanted to see in India, the only animal I wanted to see was an elephant. And the last day that we were there, I was able to see one. He walked right up next to the car. He was just in traffic on the street, and this man was taking him somewhere. This man I took a picture of, he's on the back of a he's on the back of a motorcycle, and he's carrying, I think it's a door. And there's another man on the front, I hope, who's driving it. And this is commonplace, which amazes me. At first, you think to yourself, wow, look at that man on his moped carrying a 20-foot pole. And then by the time you leave, you just think, nah, that's normal. All right, this was the wedding that I was invited to. This man pulls up to me on his motorcycle. I was walking through town, and he says to me, I've been observing you for several days. And, as if that's not a way to start a conversation. I've been observing you for several days. And he says, where are you from? And I talked to him about where I was from and what I had been doing at the school. And I invited him to come to the school. And he says, well, before you go back to the school and teach, will you come to a wedding? And I said, well, I should probably get back. I have to study for the next day. He says, no. This is, you may never get to see this again. This is a traditional Assamese wedding. I said, well, I got to go. I got to study for my class tomorrow. Long story short, I end up on the back of this guy's motorcycle, and he drives me to his sister's wedding. First time I had ever ridden on the back of a motorcycle, too. He drives me to his sister's wedding, and there's a band at this wedding. This is the bride. This is Surya. This is the bride, and she was getting married. And what they do is they sit in this tent for 3 days, and all the guests come to invite them. But I was asked to come in here, and they fed me. I met all this guy's family. I was introduced to everybody. He had more brothers and sisters than I could have in like 5 lifetimes. But I met them all, and I talked with them all. And we talked to them a little bit about Christianity. We invited them to the church. They were Hindus, and this was a Hindu wedding. This is the man I got on his motorcycle. He was very, very nice, though. He doesn't look so nice, but he was extremely nice. And he begged me to stay until 1 in the morning because they don't get married until really late at night. The groom stays in his home, and then towards midnight he comes and they get married around midnight around a fire, and then they go off together. And so he begged me to stay until midnight. He said, this would make me really happy if you stayed. But I couldn't because I had to be up at 4:45 the next morning to teach in the school. So we stayed probably till about 10, and we had a very good time. Saw a lot of things we had never seen before, but it was good. So I want to personally thank, and for my father's sake as well, thank the congregation here for their support. We had a lot of good studies at the school. It's hard to present on all the work that we've done just because most of it goes on in the classroom with our students, those first 4 hours of the day. But we had many, many good studies. I hope that they follow up on those studies. One of the good things that happened while we were there, they had an English worship service, but they didn't have an Assamese worship service, which seemed odd to me because most of the people who live around there speak Assamese and don't speak English. And so we suggested that why don't you start an Assamese worship service so that when you do convert these people who speak Assamese or speak Hindi, they have a place to worship there directly in the city. And so they began that the last week that I was there. Brother Lalit and some of the brethren there that speak Assamese already are going to continue to have that worship service. So I think it'll be good for the church and for the school. But I hope that this isn't my last trip to India. I had a good time. It was extremely hot. It was 113 the day I left New Delhi. But it was an excellent experience. It will definitely teach you a lot about yourself and a lot about people in general, just the way that these people live. It'll teach you how to be a better Bible student and how to look at the Bible from a different perspective, and how to see that the Bible, even though it's written at one time, is relevant to not only people in this country for all time, but also for people in every other country as well. We got into some good discussions that I had never thought about because their culture is so much different than ours. It'll definitely teach you to be a better evangelist as well. Brother Lalit doesn't take no for an answer when he tells you to preach to somebody. So you've got to find something to say. And as the month went on, I got better and better. So I've learned a lot. I hope that they learned a lot from my class. I want to thank you for supporting me. It's nice as a missionary. It's hard enough just to prepare the class material. It's nice to not have to worry about financials as much when you have a congregation that will support you. Dad thanks you as well. And I know that he had a good time and he learned a lot as well. So with that, I want to extend the invitation of Christ. As we mentioned, the Bible was written over 1,600 years. And it was written by over 40 men. But for all men, it was relevant. It is relevant. One of the studies that we had while we were there, Brother Lalit was speaking about the scientific foreknowledge of the Bible. Things that were written many, many years ago that science has only discovered very recently. And one of those evidences that he gave was that the light was in the blood. Leviticus talks about light being in the blood. For a long time, scientists didn't know that, and doctors didn't know that. He said, without your blood, you can't survive. And the Indians understood that. One thing that he always told me to preach about next was that even though our physical lives are dependent on our blood, our spiritual lives are all dependent on the blood of just one man, and that's our Savior, Jesus. Without Christ, we would have no spiritual life. And so his blood is extraordinarily important, and that's not something any other religion can offer you. You can be in Christ this evening and come in contact with his blood. If you've heard the word and you believe that it's true, you're willing to repent of your sins and let Jesus' blood cleanse you of those sins, confess his name and be baptized into him and into the church, you have that opportunity to do that this evening. It could be that you are a Christian and perhaps you've neglected to be what you should be. Jesus' blood is still there for you, can provide you spiritual life once again. So if you have any need this evening, please come as we stand and sing.